Okay, everyone, welcome to episode 2 of Hacked by Halftime, presented by Victory Cyber Consulting. Again, I am Travis Weitzel. I am a cyber warfare technician at the Department of War, and any views that I say here are not a reflection of the United States government. I am also a PhD student currently pursuing a cybersecurity degree focused on the sports industry. And with that, I'll turn it over to my co host, Steve.
Hey, how's everybody doing? I'm Steve Watchers. I also work for the Department of War and as a civilian, but again, like Travis said, everything we discuss and all of our views have nothing to do with the Department of War. It is purely our opinion and what we've learned through our education in academia. Because I have a master's in sports administration, as well as I'm getting ready to start my PhD here in a few months for evaluation, measurement, and research. So, yeah.
All right. Well, today's topic, the beginning of a series, a 4-episode series focusing on NIL. And for those listening who do not know what NIL is, it is the name, image, and likeness. Kind of, I would call it a movement in NCAA right now. So to kind of discuss NIL and what it is, right, you have to really start with the main factor, which is money. It's allowed college athletes to begin to get compensated for a lot of the work that they do and the money and the revenue they generate for colleges. Steve, I just want to hit some quick facts here on NIL and how much it's grown in such a short time. Some stats from like CBS Sports says that Power Four college football players often see deals ranging from 100,000 to $800,000 a year at the higher end, and then you'll have occasional outliers exceeding 1 million. I think as of today, I was just reading there was a quarterback for a Power Four program who signed a $4 million a year deal with Nike. So to put that into perspective, I mean, you think about what the average citizen is making. And now you have a 19-year-old freshman or 18-year-old freshman at a Power Four college who's going to be, I would guess, almost quadrupling the average income for a household with that's probably got 2 people salary, right? So it's pretty impressive the amount of money that college players can earn now. There is a flip side to that, though, with the 500 or $800,000 a year. Or the average for NIL earnings for other athletes not at Power Four college football programs, for example, are much lower. So especially outside of those top tier, a lot of athletes are only making a few $1,000s, and many deals are small and often informal, right? Which is dangerous, and that's according to SI Sports Illustrated. And then this kind of dives into the cyber portion of it, right? Because the deals are so lucrative for these top athletes, they attract more attention, including people who want to impersonate brands, offer fake contracts, or extort athletes. The asymmetric earnings is, I guess, how you would say that, is big money for some and then low oversight for almost everybody. So it creates a huge opportunity for cyber threats. How would you see, kind of, in your opinion, cyber threat or discussing those facts? How do you think a cyber threat's looking at this situation?
Yeah, I think, as we know, when you start throwing that kind of money around, that's a big deal. Definitely going back to the origination of NIL, it was very controversial at first, which can understand. However, when a university or the NCAA or whatever program is gaining that much revenue off of a player's name, their image, and obviously the likeness and how much they're followed and everything, is a big deal. With that being said, when you have an 18, 19-year-old kid, because, we were 18, 19 years old years ago, and you start throwing that type of money at us, it's like, oh my gosh, I've got so much more money than I've ever seen in my entire life. Let's also tie it to the fact that the current generation, that generation in college right now, heavily relies on technology, whether it's primarily their phones, devices, all that stuff. And there's just so many more avenues for a cyber adversary to, I'll say, approach them, but to target them,
Yeah.
because it could be something as simple as going. I think we discussed a little bit the last episode of just going after their Instagram account, or whatever they do to just comment on, that's all it takes. So I think one of the biggest questions is, you have your 4 and 5 star athletes. Doesn't matter if it's football, baseball, basketball, gymnastics, whatever the case may be. You have these top recruited athletes that's going to be looked at and going to end up getting these deals. What type of training or what type of advice and legal expertise do they get before they sign these deals? What type of team do they have behind them that's sitting there going, okay, let's heavily look at the contract. Let's look at all the avenues this could come at from an adversarial perspective, like you and I are used to looking at. Because
Yeah.
I don't think that's fully there. I think it's getting there, but
Yeah.
just like everything else, it takes time.
Yeah. And then that's a good point, right? Really looking at it in my head as like an adversary, it's kind of two approaches. You have one, which is kind of your, we'll call it like the crown jewel is a term in cyber to look at big targets or information that would be critical for you to kind of exploit to gain an advantage. I look at those top tier athletes as like my crown jewel.
Yep.
So they're going to be targeted. But what's interesting is even those who are in the Sports Illustrated report, it's like, oh, they only make a few $1,000s, right? But still, that person is vulnerable as well because they aren't getting as many deals. So when you or possibly not getting as many deals. So when they're hit with an offer, they may be prone to want to accept it and dig into it because they're trying to create that revenue for themselves. So
Yeah.
it really, yeah, it's full spectrum targeting almost.
Yeah. And as we both know too, those larger names, the ones that are get the bigger deals, they may have the support network to help protect them.
Yeah.
Whereas, the not so well named athletes that are not known yet, they're the
Yeah.
ones that are, like you said, getting those lower deals, but they don't have the support network. So therefore, I would personally consider them a softer target,
Yeah.
right? Like
Absolutely. Yeah.
it's like, hey, if I'm going to send a phishing email out, am I going to target somebody like, the age group like you and I who are used to this type, or am I going to target the older generation,
Yeah.
who isn't as good with computers, who doesn't understand or fully look at a URL,
Yeah.
all that stuff. That's how I look at it as a softer target.
And now with the advent of AI,
Oh
where you
gosh.
can see some of the for those who haven't gone to like an OpenAI's platform like ChatGPT, or even, I mean, a lot of them are out now, but I'll just use GPT as the example because that's the big one in the game. Is the videos that you can create are so realistic. Then for those who are unfamiliar with cyber, I would say go to YouTube or LinkedIn and watch someone like Rachel Tobeck get to work and her ability to use AI to create the voice, the videos, everything to essentially fish top tier people. It is, and these are corporate people as well as some of the cybersecurity experts that are out there that she does this to. So it just shows like, yeah, Rachel's a professional and she's a stud at the craft and everything like that. But there are also people that move with malicious intent that have that same skill set. So anytime there's finance tied into it, it's going to be a dangerous game for sure.
At the end of the day, we both know sports are real business, right? Like
Yep.
that is what it is. Like we love to enjoy sports, we love to watch sports, we love to talk about sports. I mean, today, Monday, at work today, how many people, was I walking by cubicles or whatever the case, and they're talking
Yep.
about NFL games from yesterday, or the game on tonight, or college from this past weekend.
Yeah.
It's a lifestyle. But it's at the end of the day, it's a business.
Yep.
And I'll use what I like to tell people all the time, and as hopefully this doesn't affect our viewing, but I'm a Cowboys fan, and I think Jerry Jones is a good example because Jerry Jones, when it comes to business and how he's turned the Dallas Cowboys into the number one profiting sports organization worldwide. Now, my views of him being so in
Yeah.
depth ops, we're not going to get into that right now. But again, it's money. Like, and Dallas Cowboys, they make their money. They don't make all their money off ticket sales, make their money off that brand. Same with, college football and just college sports in general. Like you, where I'm at now. You roll about
Yeah.
for everybody to know I'm in Alabama. Not a
Yep.
big deal, but God forbid every other car you see on the highway has that big old A, and if it don't, you better watch out.
Yep. It's either Auburn or Alabama,
Yeah,
right? Like, there's essentially the two religions that you can follow.
yeah.
There's no other religion outside of those two for college football down there. So,
But that's the thing too is, and I don't mean to get us off track, but
no.
it's not just college anymore. They've
Yep.
already started it with high school kids. Like, kids in high school, 16, 17-year-olds are getting offered deals now.
Yeah.
And hey, it's a recruitment tool, especially. Like that's another
Oh,
big
yes.
piece. Like what's his name? Phil Knight from Nike. He
Yeah.
gave, he contributed so much millions of dollars to Oregon on the road, and he's a diehard Oregon fan, which so am I. Um,
Yeah.
but you can't tell me someone like Nike Phil Knight who says, "Hey, yeah, you come to this school and play football because you're a 5-star rated athlete.
Yeah.
You're going to get a deal with Nike that's worth $1 million, just to say
Yeah,
a million." It's
exactly.
like it's crazy.
Yep. Yeah, it is. It is. I love to see it because I remember growing up, there was one play for a South Carolina running back, and his name is going to escape me, but he was like the top running back in the country, projected to be like a top 10 NFL pick. And I'm literally watching on a Saturday, and he blew out his knee his senior year. And as a result, didn't get, you know, he never got any of that money because NIL wasn't around.
Nope.
But it's stuff like that where I think NIL is just I love it personally, but I think it comes with a significant amount of risk, right? And
Yeah.
who's managing that risk. So to jump into some of these stories that are out there now about NIL fraud or using cyber to kind of get to the end state of exploiting these athletes. Savannah, I apologize if I butcher your last name. I did watch a few YouTube highlights to figure out how to say it. Hear the announcer say it, but Savannah Sheenhair is a gymnast at LSU. She was also at Florida, so like a phenomenal gymnast. And watching her highlights, I was blown away. But she's a really good example, and I am so proud of her, really, for speaking up about what she faced in NIL because I'm sure there are hundreds of athletes that are facing this and they just don't say anything, right? Because of perception, because of whatever the case may be. But Savannah was nearly scammed and she agreed. You can go Google this stuff, it's all out there. I highly recommend it. But she agreed to model for a clothing company. But it turned out like the deal essentially had a facility fee and a $1,500. And then when they sent her a $3,000 paycheck, it bounced. So it was kind of like fraudulent all the way across the board to try to get her to pay this money. And to quote her, she said it was a really scary situation, right? So this is a young lady who's at Florida and at LSU, top tier programs in multiple sports, especially in gymnastics, right? But so she probably, I would hope she had the resources at her athletic department, right? To take this to them and say, hey, how do I handle this? And the fact she was vocal about it helps. But Steve, I really think there's probably a lot more stories out there like this that we just don't see.
Yeah. Yeah. And I bet, and so I think this is a
Yeah,
a two-part discussion, but two things immediately popped in my mind when talking about just this one example alone. One, and that is one, and I don't know the answer to this. Is there a vetting program in the NCAA that says if you want to be a NIL contributor and want to be a company organization that provides money, NIL contracts to our athletes, you must go through a vetting process?
yeah.
I don't know the answer.
So that's I think the goal of the legislation that's trying to be passed right now is to provide that oversight. I know the NCAA just reported their first, I wouldn't, maybe it's their first NIL roll up saying this is how much money we received, this is how much money went out. But I know there was a revision because there was a miscalculation as well. So it begs the question, right, of oversight. I agree with you. Even if they are conducting oversight, how well is that actually being done when you have athletes, rightfully so, trying to build brands as well on top? Because that's how you're going to get these NIL deals is to build a brand. And I would agree with you, right? And I think it's one of those things. Does the NCAA? I think it would be a good discussion to have with maybe an athletic director, but do they want the NCAA to have that much oversight, or would they rather handle it at an athletic department,
Level.
right? Like
Yeah.
same things we see across corporate world and government, where it's like who should have the oversight, right? Is it the local company, or is it kind of a do you want your headquarters to do it, or do you want your franchise to do it, right? And that's a tough answer.
Yeah, that's a debate
Yeah,
through and
right.
through, and
Oh
especially
yeah,
on the legal side. I'm not a
yeah,
lawyer.
yeah, right. And I think as an athletic department, though, if you want to take on that charge, then you got to be prepared, right, for situations like this, and because it's going to come down to legal accountability, right? Like, let's say a situation with Savannah, instead of a $3,000 pay, it's $100,000 that
Yeah,
they try to scam her out of, and it works, right? And if she doesn't have the wherewithal to say, "Hey, that's kind of fishy. This is weird," and gets help, but if she doesn't do that, and let's say it's $100,000, then who's legally accountable at that point for her and her financial well-being? Is it the university, or should it be the NCAA? Fascinating. It's a really fascinating problem. So that's something I think our audience can kind of think about and maybe comment if they have opinions. I think that would be a good one for them to chime in on.
yeah, for sure. Because you got to think about like, and this is not the topic of the podcast, right?
Yeah.
It's specifically that like that overall, but things to consider are risk.
Yeah.
Where does that risk lie? Does the
Yep.
risk lie at the athlete level? Does it lie at the university level? Does it lie at the NCAA level? Like, who is assuming that risk? Because at the end of the day, if the entire purpose, one of the purposes of NIL was to give that freedom back to the players and the athletes to make that money, then it can be argued well, that risk is at your level. Then we're not going to, and I'm not saying this is true. I'm just,
We'll
speculating.
have side.
NCAA could say, well, this is not on us. This is between you and whoever you sign the dotted line with. But at the end of the day, it's like, okay, you're dealing with athletes, student athletes,
Yep.
primarily. Their focus is on being and should be on being a student athlete and developing as a human, not yeah, So, but we could dive it.
Yeah.
That could be its own series. To be honest with
Yeah,
you.
exactly. So yeah, with that being said, though, that was the Savannah case. The next case is really interesting as well. Currently, there is an extortion attempt under investigation by the FBI, which I think shows the seriousness of the situation, against NFL player Rashad White, who's a running back. For those unfamiliar, running back in the NFL now, and it's post NIL in professional sports, right? But it shows how the tactics of extortion and blackmail are being used just around athletes in general. So we have the Dallas Turner case from the Minnesota Vikings, where he was scammed out of 240K by a bank, a phishing attempt, and now you have these extortion claims on Rashad White. So it does span really the entire athlete spectrum, and it with a lot of these stories being within the last 12 to 24 months, by the way, I think it also shows an uptick in exactly what we're talking about, which is cyber adversaries or malicious cyber actors targeting athletes, right? I think it's just the beginning of more stories like this. So,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah. Yeah, it's terrifying.
Yeah, and it's just gonna get worse.
Yep, absolutely. Hence why we started the podcast, right? Thinking about what makes athletes especially vulnerable to phishing or fake contracts, fraudulent NIL offers, like we talked about. We hit on some of these points, but I think it's worth diving into a little bit more, right? But like many athletes, younger ones, it's kind of this weird generation gap that we deal with in cyber that we see where it's the older generation tends to fall victim to phishing and all of these kind of things more, and then it skips almost a generation to an extent, and then it hits that younger generation, right? And I think the reason that is there's some interesting studies out there. Younger people understand how to leverage the technology and use it extremely efficiently, but not understand how it necessarily works, right?
Mhm.
Or understand how to vet things as well as others, because they've created online identities of trust. Essentially, that's how they grew up. If you think about it, they were the first generation to go from zero to wherever they are now with full access to the internet.
Yeah,
So that
phones, iPads,
Yep, it's very comfortable, right? So that creates that vulnerability. But yeah, the younger ones, they tend to The athletes, they tend to oftentimes lack representation. We see this quite a bit in all sports where maybe your agent is a family member, right? And there's nothing wrong with that if they are properly trained, right? That's a big thing. Lawyers as well, they don't have easy access to lawyers. Steve and I were just discussing how expensive lawyers can be to keep on retainer and things like that. And they're also making, there's a lot of reported cases of athletes making like NIL agreements via social media or through offers coming into their DMs or emails without any kind of formal vetting, what you were just discussing, right? Like who's looking at this stuff. So that opens tons of opportunities, as we know, for impersonation. You can go on to, again, for those who are going to experiment with GPT after listening to this, go on and just ask it to create you a contract for whatever you're trying to do. And it will do exactly that.
Mhm.
You can ask it to give you an image for your brand. It will do you that as well. So I think Savannah's story really cite because in Savannah's story, she cites she only felt safe after working with an agency that vetted deals. So uh, whether or not all athletes have access to those kind of agencies, I think is something else that athletic departments and the NCAA needs to look at to provide a safe list, if you will, right? And then another point is for those that are listening, something you might want to take into consideration is those that have overly aggressive fees or fine print. Always read fine print, right? They can be exploited. So in Savannah's case, there was that facility fee that we discussed about that took out a 50% of what she was going to get total for the deal. So that's concerning. But yeah, that vetting point I think is having a team, right?
Yeah, so it's also NIL is still new, right? We can still put it in the okay, we won't say new, we'll say young. Let's
Yeah.
use the term young.
Yeah.
It's young, so the support mechanisms out there that every athlete needs, there's not enough of them, I don't think. Like you were talking about with Savannah, and she was able to find a company or an organization that helped her vet after that experience she had, which is great. But how many companies are there out there like
Yeah.
that specialize in NIL or whatever the case may be? Again, it's still young. It's going to take a few years for everything to get caught up to provide that proper oversight. It's going to take a lot of debate in between the NCAA and legislation and all that to say what does right look like when it comes to how much oversight each level is responsible for. So it's going to take time, and but until then, until this is a typical like in 5 maybe 10 years down the road, and that's just an arbitrary number, but in a few years down the road, when it's like, hey, there are oh look, you're an athlete, you're going to be highly recruited, you're going to be highly advertised, so here's a list of the top 15 companies that will provide you this service, which is conduct that oversight for you, look into these companies, read the fine print of each contract, not debate, but negotiate for you,
Yeah.
like all that stuff. It's going to take time, and they're not there yet. They're getting there, and I think there's a great intention to do that, but it's just again, it's too young.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you bring up a great point as hopefully as it matures, we we get to a point where these agencies or organizations are readily available for athletes.
Yeah,
Um yeah, because
but
that's really what it's gonna come down to. It's because what those agencies are doing are kind of what we're trying to help athletes and sports organizations understand, right? Is that training and education piece to work at the human level. 'Cause that's where that exploit's gonna be the most successful is at the human level.
yeah, and with Neil too, like, and kind of keeping the same topic of this portion is before a company wants to invest thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars into an athlete, they're gonna probably do some background checking on this individual. They're gonna have their hey, this athlete spend the next 2 weeks scraping their social media, everything they've
Yeah,
ever posted, because that's going to have a determination. It could be a determining. That's going to be a determining factor on the type of contract, the amount of money, because all it takes was, for some athlete when they were freshmen in high school to make some
yeah,
comment or some lewd, be part of a picture, whatever the case may be, but it's out there in social media. Well, now, like you were talking about earlier with the blackmailing and stuff,
yeah.
Well, yeah, they're not going to blackmail, but guess what? Well, you did this 3 years ago, so that hurts your, just like when you hear about an athlete getting injured, that hurts their recruitment status or hurts their draft status. Well, guess what? Now the question is, does it hurt your money status?
Exactly.
And I think that's a big thing because once you have competing organizations trying to sign these contracts with these athletes, that's going to be used as blackmail, in the sense of, hey, I know this and this about you, or they were only going to sign you for this much, and we're aware of that. We'll offer you this, or whatever the case is, and it can just unfortunately can snowball real
Oh,
quickly.
yeah, absolutely. One of those, "Hey, be ashamed if this got leaked to the press,"
Yeah,
kind of deal.
yeah, 100%. Like,
Yep. And right, I know you and I, believe everyone operates with outstanding moral and ethical guidelines when they're on the recruiting trail. I know, right?
yeah,
When they're on the recruiting trail and all of these kind of things, if you don't think a program, no matter the sport, is going to use every piece of competitive intelligence that they can gather, right, from their teams to say, "Hey, like you just said, hey, it'd be ashamed if this got out to the press. How about you sign with us for less money and take a deal," or whatever the case may be. So,
yeah. There's a lot of ways this.
could go sideways.
Oh, yeah, especially from the cyber side as we're talking about, because it's cyber's endless. Cyber's
Yep.
everywhere. Like, we rely on it so much for everything we do in life. Like, it's outrageous. It's a good and a bad, as we both know. Just like we were talking about earlier, AI. Like, it's a great tool set to have, but in the wrong hands or manipulated the wrong way, and it can be weaponized real quick. And that's the same with, when it comes to cyber with an NIL, is not just financials, which we're hitting on the most because that's what
Yeah.
the majority of NIL's about, but it also the future of an athlete. We've talked about it before when it comes down to like their training, their physical regimen, their diet, all that stuff that is tracked, stored in the cyber domain. Because sorry, it all is. Nobody, nobody keeps hard copy records anymore. All it takes is for that information to get leaked or uses in ransomware, in a ransomware attack, and say, hey, I have this information about you, which could affect your future in sports, could affect your money now, which, as we know, a lot of these athletes do need that money to live and to function, because the days of they're still there, but the typical days of student athletes also working 2, 3 jobs at the same time, still happening. Oh, hey, power kudos to them because that's not easy. But with that being said, it's like that money's there to help supplement their costs of university. It's especially the ones that aren't on scholarship. Like,
Exactly.
but long term wise, it's all that information about one individual, about that one 5-star top running back, quarterback, pitcher, gymnast, whatever the case is. It's all sitting in the cyber domain.
100%. Right.
Like,
It's the conduit to touch the athlete, essentially.
yeah. And it
Yeah.
makes it easy because, like you just said earlier, DMs. A company can I don't have to go through an agent nowadays. I can just straight DM somebody. And as studies have shown, especially with the younger generation, they don't like having DMs unanswered. They don't like having those numbers next to their apps that say you have this many messages that you haven't answered. And a lot of them are trying to, get with their fan base and,
Yeah.
build that relationship, build that
That
brand.
brain. Yeah.
But man, just by accepting, like, hey man, like, I saw this article about you. Is this true? And that athlete doesn't pay attention and clicks on that article, and guess what?
Yeah.
Yeah, you and I
Exactly.
both know. I have
Yeah.
full
Right.
access to your phone. Thank
Yeah.
you.
100%. Right. And so, we that leads in perfectly to what we were going to kind of talk about next, which is that national security or corporate cyber threat. It's really mirroring itself in the NIL world, right? Extortion is a big one in the corporate world, where, hey, we're going to threaten harm unless payment is made. We talked about Rashad White, the NFL player, dealing with that. Phishing, I do want to hit on a little bit harder, right? Because you mentioned that, and that's really the primary access for a lot of ransomware and things of this nature. So, for those who are unaware of what phishing is, think about it. You get a bank, let's say you bank with Bank of America. Bank of America emails you and says, hey, click this link to update your password. And then when you go to click on the link, it looks like bankofamerica.com, but maybe there's a zero instead of an O in the .com, and you're not paying attention. You click on it. That in turn takes you to a bogus website where maybe you enter your username and password, and then someone steals your money. Essentially, they have your bank credentials at that point. Or
A big
you,
one for that, by the way,
yeah,
lately, and it actually happened to me, but I caught it, was I got an email from my credit card company saying, "Hey, we need you to update your income so we can reevaluate how much
interesting.
credit we give you on your credit card to basically up my limit." They're like, "You need to update your income." I was like, "No." And
Yeah.
so obviously ran the link through some checks, and it was like, "No, this is." I was like, "That's what I thought." Like,
Yep.
yeah, no. So it's something as simple as that.
Yeah. And there's also short links that are out there as well, where they can say, like you were kind of talking about, hey, did you know that this is out on social media about you right now? And it'll be a short link. I mean, what a short link is, it's not a full URL. It'll just be something tiny. That's why they call it like a tiny URL for those that are out there listening. So you click that because you're worried something is it bad out there about you. And as a result of that, maybe it's delivering like a malware payload to your phone. And people might say, okay, so what, right? They have my data. So I've heard that argument a lot in doing cybersecurity trainings and all of these kind of things, like what's already out there anyway, blah, blah, blah. Right. And for those who are under that mindset, and it's okay, like that's a way to look at it, not how I look at it at all. But think about everything you consider private being public, right? And that doesn't even necessarily have to deal with nasty photos on your phone, right? Or anything like that. Think about maybe texts that you send to your mom about problems that you're having in a relationship, or text to your friends about you talking about teammates in the case of an athlete, right? That you're like, hey, man, this guy's really not pulling his weight. We need to do better, XYZ. Now, think of that going all public. How do you think that's going to look, right? Like,
Or group chat.
yeah,
You talk, and I'm included. I have group
yeah,
chats with certain different groups of friends. I have my hunting buddies. I have my, military, but all that stuff.
yeah.
And certain things can go in one chat, but won't go in another.
Nope.
And think of if all your group chats that we all protect very well, and it's usually nothing too crazy, but it's that personal information, personal discussions that you have tied yourself to with your close friends.
Yeah,
What happens when all that gets leaked? Because now it's not even just affecting you, it's affecting your friends. And
exactly.
all because you know what? You didn't care. Well, my data, who cares if my data's out there?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Think about how your friends look at you, right? And all those kind
Yeah.
of things. So, it couldn't even be it could be a friend venting to you about something. And now that's there. And now I think about the trust. And that's the thing is in sports, right? Just like the military, I often compare them. Everything relies on two things, which is people doing what they're supposed to be doing and then trust, because you're trusting that that person is doing what they're supposed to be doing. So, yeah, I think that's a great point. And then to dive in, we talked about the human domain here, right? So kind of looking at it from athletes' perspectives. So in the Savannah case, we talked about her at length, but I mean it's a great use case for this discussion. She got, like we said, almost got scammed. Some of the red flags that were out there was the significant upfront fee for the facility. We discussed it was 50% of the total contract. Promises weren't filled, so that paycheck bouncing, and then the lack of clarity in contract terms, which is according to Bloomberg law. They saw some discrepancy there. So if you're an athlete, listen, yeah, go ahead.
I'll say, and I remembered it and I just looked it up. That for recently, the UK wanted Apple to
Yeah,
leave basically a backdoor to all encrypted devices and data. So that
Yeah.
way, in the event of I'm going to use the term, obviously something equivalent to national security, they could get into it and get
Yeah.
that data. And that went back and forth. So I promise you guys, I promise everybody this, and Travis, you know this as well, is different companies have agreements with governments that in the event of something taking place, they have access. Like I'd have to look it up, and don't quote me on this
Well,
one, but if I
yeah.
remember correctly, like Ring doorbell,
Yeah.
law enforcement supposedly no longer needs a specific warrant to get access to get a hold of the Ring doorbell, the company, to say, hey, this address, this house that's owned by this person, I want their last 6 months of all the footage from their Ring doorbell.
Yeah.
You as the owner never know that.
Yeah.
Just if that was, apparently it's been scrapped according to in August. It was
Okay.
this UK scrapped demand for Apple to give backdoor access to provide backdoor access to encrypted user data stored in the cloud. And the US pushed real hard to say no, like absolutely not. And supposedly it was, you know, that was agreed upon. But at the end of the day, again, people don't know when you have whatever device you have, whether it's an iPhone, whether it's a Mac, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You don't know what permissions that those companies have given to law enforcement or other agencies to pull that data.
Or even better, permissions that you've given them by accepting the
Yep.
user agreement, right? So
Yep. Or the
wondering,
cookies.
yeah, exactly. You're wondering how Facebook heard you talking about a vacation you want to go on, and then you have ads for all of these, all that exact location.
Good thing that never happens in Amazon.
I know, right? It's it's because if you look at the user agreement, like, hey, yeah, we're going to get access to your microphone even when, or only when the app is active, right? But people don't realize the app is active unless you sign out of the app when you're done with it. If you stay logged in on the app, you're technically active.
And some, if you have the app downloaded on your phone,
Yep.
people think if I don't have the app open, it's not
Yeah.
active. That's not true. If the app, some apps, you got to read the fine print. If it is
Yep.
on your phone, that app can be active
Yep.
and you don't know it.
So that's just a little cybersecurity tip for everybody out there, right? Oh yeah. And her resolution, Savannah's resolution was to get with an agency. I think the agency was Raymond Rep. So shout out to them for helping athletes, right? But ultimately, it lowers the risk. You can never fully stop risk for those who are unfamiliar with cybersecurity. You're always going to have somewhat of a risk factor. It's just getting it to a point where it's acceptable for the athlete or for that staff that's working with them. And digital identity and physical performance, right? Because this is something I always think about with athletes. Athletes know they need to train, diet, keep themselves physically safe, right? Not going out and putting themselves in physically dangerous situations, but are less trained, way less trained in digital safety. And it's kind of shocking to me right now because every athlete is building their own brand and it's wonderful to see. They should be doing those things. But what we mean is like, how do you vet a contract? How to spot phishing? How to read your clauses, right? And then protect your online accounts. So it's one of those things I know you and I discussed before where it's like an athlete will give their social media credentials, which is username and password, to somebody else to manage, right? There's so much risk involved in that because if that person becomes spiteful over something, right? And I mean, we talked about the two religions of Alabama and Auburn, right? And
Mhm.
Alabama, or yeah, down in Alabama there. You think you have a bad game as a player, and let's say you lose the Iron Bowl, and it's because you had a fumble or an interception or something along those lines, and you have somebody who is a staunch Alabama fan, and even though you're maybe their star player and you cost them the game, they get angry at you. I mean, they start posting all your private stuff on social media, right? Or just putting out a bunch of nasty things in your name, which damages your reputation and could possibly cost you some of those brand deals. And
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
and I was just going to say, if people don't think that is possibly true, I mean, this is a rivalry that killed like what 100-year-old tree or something along those lines. Someone
Uh,
poisoned the tree, and yeah, so like I think I'm speaking within the realm of possibility here.
well, that let's like, how often do we hear after a Saturday football game, especially college and pro? You hear about it more in college because of the I think of the lens we as society look at college athletes as, and I don't want to call them kids or children, but they're
Yeah.
younger, right? They're not in the pros yet,
Yeah.
but they have a bad game or they have a fumble and the game's over. How they start receiving death threats
Yeah.
or just physical threatening abuse, and it's not come in the form of mail. How's what's the I don't know the percentage obviously, but
Yeah.
obviously it's going to be the highest is the easiest way is social media,
Yep.
whether that's direct DM, whether that's an email, whatever the case may be. They're somebody posting something on a random page.
Yep.
These kids who are worried about being student athletes, as well as having to focus on things like NIL, are also having to open their apps and see, because they made a bad play, that they're being told somebody's threatening their life or their family's life, because we hear about that too, and not just the financial impact or the physical impact, but the emotional impact that's having on people.
100%, right? And that's um with NIL and the money involved, you have that aspect. You also have a sporting aspect
Hmm.
or a sports betting aspect involved there,
Betting,
right? Where
100%.
yeah, where hey, you screwed up my parlay. I know we plan to do a sports betting episode later in the future,
Yep,
and we also plan to have a sports psychologist on to talk about the mental toll that these I consider it a cyber harassment campaign pretty much, where
100%.
yeah, once one person comments on an Instagram thread and says like you should go kill yourself, right? These are some nasty things that are said out there. Pro athletes face it as well, and I think uh, it's really nasty because some pro athletes have actually posted some of the things that people say to their wives
Yeah,
or their husbands about their performance.
or
Uh,
kids getting
yeah, their
I
kids getting
think it was
harassed.
Matt Stafford. I think it was
Yeah,
his I think it was Matt Stafford. Oh man, it was a well-known professional quarterback. His daughter was basically told at school, and the daughter was in like elementary school, but the
geez,
kids in her class were saying, "You guys have to move because of the things your mother said online about your dad." Oh yeah,
just
like
nasty, right?
yeah, it's ridiculous. Like, let that happen to my kid.
Yeah,
There'd be
and
a whole different yeah.
it's one of those things people are going to say, well, how's that cyber, right? What people fail to understand is
Mhm.
cyber is, again, that conduit that is connecting athletes to do great things. Like we see so many great stories. Sarah was showing me last night this thing called NFL Elementary. If no one's ever seen these videos, I highly recommend it. So it's a school teacher. She has the kids draft a team. They pick what team they're going to represent that year. And all of these NFL teams are coming out and sending them like signed jerseys. Like the Eagles, Saquon Barkley sent a signed jersey and all this kind of cool stuff. And then you also see players give so much back to the community.
Mhm.
I can't tell you, I probably couldn't go a week without hearing about somebody doing a 5K or the turkey drives, right? Like Christmas toy donations, all these great things. And I see that with the NIL contracts too, that these college athletes are giving back. And you just have people that are nasty out there that are gonna
Yeah,
for
but
one bad play.
But like you said, how are they doing it? The
Yep,
platform. It's the cyber
exactly.
platform, whether it's a social media through an app, whatever the case may be,
Yeah,
but it makes it so much easier to, jump on a computer and hide behind the screen and have be that, typing warrior, if you want to call it, whatever you
yeah,
want to call it.
yeah, absolutely.
To say, oh, say all these negative things, but that individual never have the courage to say something like that to somebody in
Oh yeah.
person,
Yeah,
but they
probably
can
shake their
hide.
hand and say, "You're my hero,"
Yeah,
like
100%, but again, it's going back to that cyber aspect, good, bad, and indifferent,
yep,
especially with nil, because, again, no matter how much good you do in the world, as soon as you start putting money on the table, things change.
100.
Like, people who are dedicated to a cause, who live their life to do something, unfortunately, you put the right amount of money in front of them on cash on that table in front of them, and their perception, their decision factors, are going to change.
Yeah,
Their internal, what I call filters
yep,
of how they make those decisions are going to change. And yeah, it just ties back, you can look at it from a NIL perspective, and that's how it's gonna happen.
Yep, 100%. Uh, and with that being said, right, so the difference, I would say, in targeting, because a lot of people commented on the last podcast and said, "Well, how's sports different?" And I like the conversations I had with some people that listened to it, different perspectives and things of that nature, right? But there aren't any industries, like we kind of talked about in episode one, where I don't know if anyone could tell me the top 10 earning doctors in America, or the top 10 salesmen in America, or the top 10 insurance representatives in America. But I know I could probably find a sport and ask them who are the 10 best, or do you think are the top 10 paid? Or you can just Google very easily who the top 10 are, right? So I think athletes pose a unique risk environment because of that high public profile, right? They're typically younger athletes in their prime. They want to essentially make as much money as quick as they can, because they know that being athletic it kind of goes with time, right? It'll fade. So
Yep.
they have to kind of
Well,
highlight.
yeah, they hear the horror stories of all the, famous athletes who 5 years after they retire from their sport
Yeah.
are broke because they mismanaged their money.
Yep, exactly. Or the stories of, "Oh man, if that guy didn't get injured, he would be the best," right? Or she would be amazing, and this wouldn't even be a discussion type deal. Additionally, as they're trying to build these brands, they're less familiar with contracts and brand management, so they can be susceptible there. So they have followers, social media exposure, name recognition. So scammers are going to look at them. I would say malicious cyber actors would look at them with both a willingness to target, and there's probably a lack of scrutiny from the athlete's perspective of, everybody wants to kind of pay me, maybe because I have access to NIL. So I am going to be more susceptible to kind of take maybe some of these shady deals.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
sorry, I don't it's also like you said, it's shady. There are shady deals out there, no, regardless, but it's also the smaller deals. People are going to be scared of the smaller deals because it may come from and we saw this when NIL first came about, was athletes were doing commercials for like, I don't name random
Yep, exactly.
like I'll use a great example. I still remember when the first time I saw Shaq in the General Auto Insurance commercial.
Yeah. Yep.
Like, who is what we all
Yeah.
heard of Allstate. We've all heard of Farmer. We've all heard of all those. And then all of a sudden Shaq appears in this commercial with the General, and it just blew up because it's
Yeah.
Shaq. And he
Exactly.
talked about how why he supported them, and supposedly in college, that was the only place that would give him car insurance
Yeah.
when he was trying to buy his first car. But it's like
Exactly.
it's a little thing like that when they're getting offered, hey, why don't you, contract with us? And it's like, well, the concern is, well, nobody knows who you are.
Yep.
Like,
So that brings up a really interesting point,
yeah,
right? Is we talked about the money in the first part of this episode, so we'll revisit that because that's what we're
yeah,
talking about with these smaller deals and all this. So, according to Sports Illustrated, half of NIL deals disclosed have values of $100 or less, showing that deals are often very small and maybe aren't worth the risk, considering how what SI or Sports Illustrated says is a low fee, right? But what I think people also fail to understand is college is extremely expensive. And if you're not on a full scholarship, maybe $100 a month or whatever the case may be is what you're going to use to eat, right?
yep,
Or pay for your books or something. It doesn't matter what you do with the money. To me, I think having some of those smaller deals, I would say they're probably aimed at a more vulnerable population, if I were
yeah,
to guess, right?
I would agree.
Which shows what you're discussing is like, yeah, they're small deals. And we kind of talked about that full spectrum threat list where it's like, hey, just go down a roster at this point, because somebody in there, whether it's the top tier target or the person making the least amount of NIL money on the team. I think what people fail to understand is the athlete will still be a phenomenal target for any kind of malicious cyber actor. Because what also isn't included in there, right, is you have things like that are called for the audience, ransomware, which will lock you out of your system unless you pay a fee or something along those lines. But if they get full access to your phone, then they can maneuver to a top tier target, one, if
Yep.
they're not just going after you. So it's really about understanding the risk presented to the entire athletic department and the athlete themselves, but really it's the athlete could be a conduit to something much larger.
The network. It's the network that can be targeted from, and what you're saying is absolutely correct. And it's a
Yeah,
great point because those $100 or, whatever deals that Sports Illustrated is talking about, the top running back or quarterback may not go for those, but maybe the punter will.
yeah,
Or, a somebody who only plays special teams.
yep,
But once I have access, if I'm a malicious cyber actor and I can get access to those individuals, well, guess what? I can now span across and, yeah, you just
yeah,
open up your network to me because everybody that's in your phone or your device or whatever the case is, or, just let's say that individual goes to somebody's house and jumps on their Wi-Fi.
yep. Yeah, I went
Because
to coach's
what's
house
one of
for
the
dinner.
first, yeah, what's one of the first things anybody asks when they come visit you? Hey, what's your
Yep.
Wi-Fi? Let me connect. You gotta like in, even family for us, like we have a portion of our Wi-Fi that's for guests only.
Yeah, network
Like,
segmentation,
yeah,
right?
and
Like,
we
you gotta
absolutely.
yeah,
And how many of them actually do that? And all it takes is for that player, because like you said, coach is hosting a dinner, or a booster is
yeah,
hosting a dinner, and 75% of the team shows up. Well, you brought the device that
exactly.
you don't know has
Malware on it, right?
yeah, malware on it. Thank you, malware on it, and or doing something like an airdrop. Like
Yeah,
my mother-in-law was here this past weekend, and she handed me her phone for something, and I happened to look at it, and I was like, "Wait a minute, what?" And I was like, "Mom, why is your AirDrop on?" She's like, "No, it's not. I don't even know how to turn it on." I'm like, "Your AirDrop is open to everybody right now. Anybody who is near you with an iPhone can send you data, which tells me your window to your house is left wide open."
yeah, exactly.
And that's all it takes, though, is and now you have
Yeah,
access to that entire network.
yeah, and it's funny because it's one of those things where if any coaches are out there listening to this podcast, right, and you've had players over, do you have your guest Wi-Fi and then your Wi-Fi to the technical term would be network segmentation, and just because you create guest Wi-Fi doesn't necessarily dictate network segmentation, but what I would say is that it's it's the best what most people can do, right? Unless you're gonna have 2 different networks running at your house. But it's one of those things where I would love to know as a booster or a coach, right? Like, do you do that? I would guess the overwhelming answer is no.
But it's not just network. So, and I have a great example of this for people to consider. When my wife and I lived in Maryland, we lived for the first few years we were there, we lived in a townhouse, right? As everybody knows, if you've ever been to Maryland, and if you ever lived in a townhouse, it's like an apartment, but closer somewhat.
Yep.
Anyway, we had a is it Tempur-Pedic? One of those
Yeah.
crazy expensive beds that you can have an app for and control the amount of air in it and what angle it goes, all that stuff. So one night, my wife and I were going to adjust the bed, and I used my phone to, put more air in or do something.
Yeah.
And when I hit the button scan for local bed or whatever the
Yeah.
app offered, 2 houses down, my neighbor's bed popped up.
Wow.
And I was like, and I knew it was hers. Why? Because they had titled it by her name.
Yeah.
Because I know she didn't do it. And I'm like, no, like, okay, it's just her bed. And then looking at settings, I realized, no, they tied her bed into her Wi-Fi network, which was wide open. And so I physically had to call her, and her name's Sharon. I say, "Hey, Sharon, do you have a blah blah bed or whatever it was?" And she's like, "Yeah, why? How do you know that?" And I was like, "Do you have this internet?" And she's like, "Steve, how do you know that?" And I'm like, "Okay, you and I need to have a discussion because your network is wide open. I can see everything." And she's like,
Yeah.
"Well,"
See?
I was like, "Let me guess, your printer is this and it's in this room of your house." And she's like, "How'd you know that?" And I'm like, obviously I wasn't being malicious. I was letting her know, like,
Yeah.
so we went over and had to help her fix all that.
Wow.
But that's all it takes. Yeah. it's all it takes is for, a Bluetooth device or your printer, or whatever the case is, not in your entire Wi-Fi. People need to stop thinking. Not people need to not only think and have blinders on of just their Wi-Fi network. It's anything, any device that emits a signal in
Yep,
their house or on their property, even
exactly.
that, if not properly secured, allows an access point to you everything else. So, if you backwards plan, this isn't for you, obviously, but this is more for
Yeah,
the listeners. If they think about it, that bed that I was telling about my neighbors, I could use that to come in, the back door in a sense, and then hit every device to include her. I could have got to her phones, any tablet she was doing, anything. So, which means I had access to her laptop, her computer, which was actually a desktop,
yeah,
hardlined into the Wi-Fi router, which still had a default password, but we fixed that.
there you go.
Yeah, but now I have access. Like, in every day, she does banking information. She does personal health information, because nowadays you can't go to a doctor's appointment without getting an email from the doctor first. The day before, saying fill out this questionnaire again.
Exactly.
Like,
Yep.
we rely on cyber so much, and all it takes is something that simple. So sorry. So I'm going to bring it back to
No.
athletes and
Yeah.
sports. All it takes is something to that level, of somebody who knows what they're doing to target, i.e., a soft target. It doesn't matter who it is, but find that way in and just exploit it. And from that point on, it's almost, I'm not going to say unstoppable, because Travis, you and I both know what's the number one thing. What's the number one thing when somebody in cyber hears, or in IT hears, your network could be compromised? What's the first thing you do? You shut
Yep.
the whole thing down.
Yep.
You hit the
Unplug it.
yeah, you hit the
Yeah.
kill switch. You and I saw that how many times in the army?
Yeah. Too much.
Yeah, where that's the first response is, "Hey, there's an issue with your network."
Yeah.
Boom, kill switch. Like, wait, time out, dude. Like,
Yeah. We
did we
can.
really need to take down everything? Like,
Exactly.
you don't want to have to get there, but it's a
No.
snowball effect all day.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's the terrifying part, because you don't have to be technically skilled anymore to
No,
begin to conduct these attacks, right?
you can use AI to build you, and you and I both know this. It's out there on the internet. So yeah, you can have AI build you a payload, do all the coding for you, and then basically gives you a zip file, and it's become, says, you say, now explain to me how to get this as an executable and what the best means are, and it's like, oh, X, Y, and Z. And it's not the AI's fault. That's what we want AI to do, to be able to do those things for
Exactly.
us, but it takes the individual behind that system. That's what it takes, and their mindset may not be the best, and their intentions are not the best.
No. And I think that's important for athletes to move with. If you're taking one thing out of this episode, right, is like, hey, I need to do due diligence and do my homework on these messages that I'm getting. If I can afford to get an agency, I should I should do that. I should look at the resources my university provides me. Uh, and then not only that, but you can always, I mean, reach out to us, right? Like, we're there to help 100% of the way. And these are some of these educational pieces that we provide universities. Is you got to think 5 to 10 years from now, what is your online reputation as a university? Because that's going to be one of the biggest things.
Yeah.
Is
What's it worth?
Yep, is do you have teams in place to help athletes manage these risks? Because the minute you have an instance where an NIL, any of your players really that are earning decent NIL money, are compromised, and as a result suffer financial loss, and as a result lose brands, your brand is also going to go down with it as a university. Whether you think you should be responsible for that or not, players will see that and they will say, well, just because we've used Alabama and Auburn this whole episode, but like, if it happens at Auburn, Alabama can use that as a recruiting tool to say, hey, we never allow that to happen. We will train you to make sure that doesn't happen. Number one, but number two, you could see a significant loss in NIL revenue coming towards your university because they don't believe as an athletic department you can properly manage and train your athletes to handle what it takes to build a brand.
Well, okay, so yes, 100%, I agree
Yeah.
with you.
Yeah.
So this is Steven putting his recruiting hat back on because,
Yeah.
mind you, people, I did 3 years of Army recruiting,
Yeah. There you go.
which I actually rather enjoyed. But one thing you learn as a recruiter, especially when you're dealing with high school kids, like a military recruiter is, i.e., just like a college is you don't only convince that student athlete or that individual you're trying to recruit. Guess who else you have to recruit? The
Mm.
family, especially if they come from a household where family opinion
Yep.
is very important to them.
Yep.
So if I'm working for a random university and I'm part of the recruiting team to go sit down with, athlete and talk to athlete, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, brothers, sisters, whatever the case is, if I can sit there and look at that family and say, not only do you get is that your son or daughter going to get offered these things, which we've seen historically, and we have these type of boosters, we have these type of deals coming through, but also we educate and take care of your son, daughter.
Yeah.
We look for, we make sure that they are. I hate to use the word trained, right? Like that's,
Yeah.
but if they are
Educated.
educated, yeah, they are
Yeah.
educated in how to properly manage these situations when it comes to the amount of money they're going to get offered, how to properly manage their social media, how to properly manage their image, their brand.
Yeah. Grow
If you can
into
convince,
a a a great young adult, right? Like
yeah,
a young adult that's ready to go
yeah,
out into the real
right.
world. Yeah.
Now imagine if you went to, I don't I don't know if I don't remember where the top recruiting state for high school football going into college football. Let's just use Florida because I know they're up there somewhere. But if I can start getting a bunch of high schools in Florida where I know that the prime athletes start coming out of, right? Like actually a bit of baseball. Baseball is a better example because everybody knows if you want to make money, if you want to do good in baseball, you start doing those summer leagues in Florida.
Yep. Yeah.
It's just one of the things you do. If you start those not agreements, but that relationship building with those teams ahead of schedule and say, hey, anybody you send to us or whatever the case is, we're going to ensure they develop as a human being. Yes, they become a contributing factor, a positive contributing factor to society, but also when it comes to their managing their money, looking out for their well-being, both physically, mentally, all that stuff. Like you tie that into the package deal, that just looks so much better for you.
Right. And that's a huge port. Like I think you hit the nail on the head because what does every major sports league have now? What does almost every athletic department that I've looked at online, at least, and I've looked at quite a bit, is essentially player development coaches that focus on like building the athlete for when one they graduate college, but then when you get into the NFL, you go through a rookie symposium that teaches you not to blow all your money, how to
Yeah,
handle your money. And why did that happen, right? Because so many athletes were coming out and they were broke within 5 years of being in the league, or once they were
yeah,
out of the league, they were essentially broke.
yeah. Injury took him out, and
Yeah, right. And
yeah,
they didn't save properly. And as a result, so I think it was one of those things where the chaos and the public, I would say, pressure from
mhm,
fans and athletes alike were like, hey, well, we weren't taught that. So
right,
they stand up these symposiums and they build the personnel, the staff out to say, hey, we're going to have somebody here that
yeah,
can help these people manage their money, et cetera, and teach them. Not
yeah,
manage their money for them, but teach them. And that's why I say we're probably 5 to 10 years out from that in the cyber domain, right?
yeah,
Is it's going to take, I mean, we're seeing the cases pile up now. Like I said, over the last 2 years, there's significant amount of use cases. NIL, I think, is only going to accelerate that progression of malicious cyber actors or malicious people using the cyber domain to get after these targets. I think that's only going to increase. And as a result of that, I would hope they do the same thing like they did for finance, where they're going to teach them how to do it, right? And we would love to obviously be a part of that. But even if not, I think it would be a huge step in the right direction.
yeah, yeah. It's a learning tool. Like it's already started a learning curve.
Yeah.
And I feel for every athlete out there that's already dealt with this. And hopefully somebody out there, a standard, I would say, I hope a standard becomes available and it makes sense and it is available to everybody to provide that education, those lessons, but that stuff out there to help support them, and provide that assistance because again, they just need it. Like,
Yeah, and I think it's time that athletic departments kinda look in the mirror, are we protecting our players properly in this NIL domain, for athletic departments? Because it's
well,
ultimately
I
it
think you and I know the answer to that, and I hate to say that, but eh, remember when you and I went to Knoxville, Tennessee for the sports
ASUN.
conference. Yeah, yeah, the sports conference. One of the briefings we sat through was athletes after, this doesn't have to do anything with cyber so much, but athletes were talking, there were former student athletes up there talking about how there were just now in the last couple of years, movements and organizations starting to be developed to help those athletes after sports because that was
Yeah.
their entire identity, right?
Yep.
Like that's all they knew was they knew life as an athlete and in college and growing up.
Yeah.
That ended for whatever reason.
Yep.
And now they don't know what to do with their life.
Exactly.
And so I'm using that as an example of tie that back to what we're discussing when it comes to NIL and everything else.
Yeah.
Those programs for those athletes, because for how long have athletes been stopping sports and struggling afterwards? We see it in the military every day, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's one of the things
Absolutely.
we had that discussion with that team with afterwards was I will say uh, the services have all their own programs for transitioning soldiers, sailors, airmen, all Marines. So that this has been your identity for the last 4 years to 20 something years, 30 years, whatever the case is. We're now going to help you prepare to transition to civilian life and civilian culture.
Yep.
Those programs are just now starting for college athletes.
Exactly.
So at what point does everybody, athletic department, excuse me, whatever the case is, take a step back, say, let's get ahead of the power curve now and start these programs of support for these athletes when it comes to NIL and everything else, especially
Yeah.
on the cyber side. Let's start
Yep.
it now. Let's not wait till 15, 20 years down the road, and,
Yeah.
we're
Let's
realizing the
not wait
backlog.
until 4 of our top 5 athletes that are on our NIL, whether it's baseball,
Yeah.
football, across your athletic department, and I think that's where the athletic department would get the most bang for its buck, right? Is, "Hey, we're gonna train or educate, really train and educate everyone within our purview." So that
Yep.
includes all teams. We're also going to provide you this resource. For example, like a VCC, you can reach out to them because we have signed a contract with them to help us manage these risks and figure out how we can best to, to really mitigate risk through the human domain. So I agree completely, and hopefully that's where it goes, right? So
Yep.
you have any closing comments on NIL, or I know we have 3 more episodes left, so
No, I mean, this was kind of the open Pandora's box of it.
yeah,
Again, this was not meant to be talk about the good, bad, or indifferent of NIL. That it's already here. It's more, again, our focus is getting people to look at it from the lens of, the filter of cybersecurity when it comes to NIL. All the way from like we discussed, the student athlete level, all the way up to, I would even say, that companies that offer those contracts, those corporations and organizations that are offering these deals, these athletes, that's something they need to be considerate of as well. And mind you, most of those companies already have some type of cybersecurity support, but still.
yeah. No, that's a great point, because I'm sure it says in the contract somewhere that, like, "Hey, you post something ridiculous, we can pull this branding at any moment." I mean, we've seen them do it with pro athletes.
Or
So,
liability.
yeah.
The term liability.
Yep, there you go. Exactly. Vague lawyer terms, right, that they can just get you
Words
on.
have meaning.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. No, but I think that wraps up episode 2, so, appreciate everyone listening, and don't forget to subscribe. This should be every 2 weeks we publish an episode, so don't forget to subscribe, and remember, hackers don't quit when the clock runs out.